Welcome to day 162. We are in 1 Kings 17 through 20. So only Kings today. And really this is the story of Elijah. So if you have your stories, there's a bunch of different things you could write down for the stories. You have the no dew or rain that we talked about yesterday. Elijah gets food from very little and brings the sun to life. Elijah versus the prophets of Baal. 40 days and 40 nights of traveling to the mountain of God. And then Elisha becomes a prophet in his place. So Elijah to Elisha. So those are stories you could have. So the boy to life, 17 verses 8 through 24. I'm not going to read all of those, but I want to share a couple things. But she said, I swear by the Lord your God that I don't have a single piece of bread in the house, and I have only a handful of flour left in the jar, and a little cooking oil in the bottom of the jug. I was gathering a few sticks to cook the last meal, and then my son and I will die. And then, of course, it goes on in verse 15. So she did as Elijah said, and she and Elijah and her family continued to eat for many days. So Elijah creates more food. Really, it's God that's doing this through Elijah. So when we talk about this, God is using Elijah to perform many miracles like he used Moses. And then we have the story of the prophets. So all these prophets of Baal come, and Elijah says, hey, you bring all your prophets here. And the story of that is chapter 18, verses 1 through 40. Again, I'm not going to read all that. The story is, so you have Jezebel on the scene as well, and we'll talk about Jezebel tomorrow. But Ahab and Jezebel, and they're causing problems, and they're worshiping Baal, and all the prophets come, and so Elijah says, hey, put all the wood here and dump a bunch of water on mine. You pick which one you want, and they pick this one, and Elijah says, okay, you guys go first, and they spend all day calling for Baal to come down and burn up their offering. And Elijah makes fun of them through the whole thing. If you read it, that's what's going on. And then finally, in the end, Elijah says, fine, put water all over mine. So they pour a whole bunch of water over it. And then in verse 38, let's go back a second. I want to show you. He prays to God. Verse 37, oh Lord, answer me so these people will know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you have brought them back to yourself. So Elijah doesn't bring the fire down. And in verse 38, it says, immediately the fire of the Lord flashed down from heaven, burned up the young bull, the wood, the stones, and the dust. It even licked up all the water in the trench. What an amazing thing that would have been. So back in Revelation, we talked about yesterday, that fire comes out of their mouths, of the two witnesses' mouths, and devours the enemies. Now, fire didn't come out of Elijah's mouth, but again, he could be one of the two witnesses. Not that God couldn't make fire come out of your mouth. If he could lick up water and make food out of nothing, he can do anything he wants, created the heavens and the universe. So always be thinking about how awesome God really is. It's not the prophets that do this. God chooses the person and does things through them. Then we have Elijah brings back rain. That's another story, chapter 18, 41 through 46. And what's important about this is the number 7 is used again. So on your list, you have the number 7 in verse 43. At the end of verse 43, it says, 7 times Elijah told him to go and look. In verse 44, finally, the 7th time, there's a little cloud coming. And then at the end of these verses, a heavy wind brought a terrific rainstorm, and Ahab left quickly. Here's the next thing. Then the Lord gave special strength to Elijah. He tucked his cloak into his belt and ran ahead of Ahab's chariot all the way to the entrance of Jezreel. This is a very long way, and he's running and beating Ahab's chariot and horses. When Christ comes back at Armageddon, he leads the people very quickly. People are moving across the land, and that's another area that we'll talk about near the end of the year. But God has the ability to make you run faster. He can make you fly if he so deemed that to be necessary. And another thing I want to say is this next one, the end of this one, 19:8. So he got up. I'm sorry. Let's go back here. Okay, so he's Elijah is running from Ahab and Jezebel because Jezebel threatens his life. And God's like using that to move Elijah to the mountain of God. So he finally gets up. In verse 8 it says, he got up and ate and drank, and the food gave him enough strength to travel 40 days and 40 nights to Mount Sinai, the mountain of God. There he came to a cave where he spent the night. So what I want to talk about there is that interesting that 40 days and 40 nights is used again, like it was back in Genesis for Moses, or I'm sorry, not Moses, Noah, when it rained and waters goes forth from the ground, 40 days and 40 nights. And if you remember back then, it stopped at that point, but there was water that covered the earth for over a year, until they rested at the mountain of God. So Elijah is there. He travels 40 days and 40 nights to get to the mountain of God. Doesn't mean anything. Just thought I'd share that with you. That's your day 162. I'll see you tomorrow.